Everyone, welcome back from the keynote session. And this is quite an amazing presentation. Those of you who have decided to attend are going to learn about a program that, I'm going to just say I got to peek a little bit ahead of time. It blew my mind. Really amazing stuff going on. So I'm going to let Christy and Karen introduce themselves because they have a lot of titles also. They do a lot of things. Okay. Good luck.
Thank you, Karen.
All right. So welcome everybody to Experiential Online Learning through Team-Based Externships. I'm Karen Bemis and I'm joined with Christy Nelson. We both wear dual hats between the Professional Science Master's Program and another research professor position at Rutgers. I'm in Marine and Coastal Sciences and Christy's associated with SCADA. Next slide. So starting in 2016, we started growing a student project course where industry partners were mentoring teams of students on semester-long projects. And we're going to talk today about how we've set up that partnering, benefits and challenges of working with this model, how we've scaled it to include students of various educational levels, and just a bit about sort of how it works. So we're interested in hearing from you with question 1 about, have you worked with an external company or nonprofit on a student-based project? And if so, what format? In terms of research project, course, or REU. Next slide. The talk is going to cover an overview of the program, something about the specific projects that we've worked on, the program structure, and then we're going to go through in a bit of depth about sort of what the outcomes have been, the lessons we've learned, and takeaways that might apply to other programs. So let's get started. Next slide. So the externship overview. So over the last 9 years or so, we've been innovating and developing a remote industry project externship program at Rutgers. It connects research, innovation, and structured faculty and company mentorship within a guided course format. We have approximately 200 students at this point between a master's degree level program and undergraduate programs. And we operate all 3 Rutgers' main semesters, fall, spring, and summer. We have a set of industry mentors as well as faculty advisors, and it's supported by a team of student workers. We've grown substantially in size over time, and the intent of the program is to provide a way for students in teams working remotely to learn under the mentorship and guidance of both a faculty member and an external company mentor. So, next slide. The externship as a whole, we're using this term to indicate an unpaid opportunity to gain more experience. They're similar to a standard internship, but are shorter and are completed on campus. And they are a partnership between our externship exchange program and a variety of partner organizations that run from small businesses, mid-sized companies, startups, Fortune 500 or 1,000, nonprofits, government agencies, just all over the board. Next slide. The biggest benefit to our students in doing an externship is just getting real-world experience in a small, collaborative, multidisciplinary group with a lot of mentoring. Next slide. The students get an opportunity to meet and network with professionals from a variety of companies and organizations. Their mentors in their projects often serve as references for the students as they go forward and look for jobs down the line. They typically are students report to us that the externship program was really helpful in getting through the interview process and getting jobs. They're not necessarily getting the jobs at the same company or organization that they worked with, but it gives them something to talk about in the interview. Next slide. I just want to spend a little bit of time on how an internship is different from an externship. So internships, you typically think of students working 9 to 5 or part-time with designated hours. The company is selecting the students. The students may work on projects or they may do business critical work, and they work either solo in a team or both. And it's not necessarily bound by a semester structure. What we call externship is something completely different. The company or organization is outlining a project, but we then vet the project and help them to create a suitable project that can run across a single semester. We match the students to the project in terms of interest and time availability. The students work 8 to 10 hours a week, but not necessarily at any specific times of the week. They always work in teams, and we have a professor or advisor from Rutgers attending the project meetings. They may or may not have a confidentiality agreement depending on the project. Next slide. So we started in 2016, and by the summer of 2017, we were up to 3 student spots, a second advisor, and knew we had something special. We now have around over 200 students, sometimes 40 to 60 different projects with 2 to 10 students per project, 45 different project organizations, 22 advisors, 12 student workers. Our students come from all across Rutgers. The program was designed for the Rutgers Professional Science and Master's students, so that's kind of our centering point in Goldstone. But we have student undergraduates coming from the School of Engineering, from the Honors College, from the Blaustein School, from the School of Arts. We also bring in students from outside Rutgers through the New Jersey Big Data Alliance and through a partnership with Westminster College. And all in all, this is a lot of different hours of work with the students. Next slide. I'll hand you over to Christy.
Thanks, Karen. Karen, can you just confirm that you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So topics that we often cover in these projects that we're offering to students are things like analytics, food science, product design, public health, cybersecurity, user experience and design, topics that cover both the STEM side of the professional science master's program as well as the business side, so general business, marketing, finance. So a second question for our audience, if you have hosted a project for a student or group of students with an outside organization of any kind, what subject area was the focus? Just so we kind of get a sense of what you're doing. So some sample projects, and again, our projects come in from such a variety of different companies, nonprofits, small businesses, government agencies. So there's a few that we'll go through, but we really cover a lot of different topics. So one that we worked with a very small coffee company in Maryland, focused on the students really doing a product design from scratch of a coffee roaster. The partner had kind of an industrial size product that they were roasting coffee in, and they wanted to be able to have a consumer size product to roast coffee that they offered for sale. So this was a multi-semester project. You can see the students there doing coffee tasting because a few actually went to Maryland to the business to meet with them. And as the project evolved, they also made an app to go along with the mock-up that they designed for, with the business hand in hand. Another sample project, just to give you a sense, is we worked with a small farm in Pennsylvania. It was a family farm, and the students got to learn about livestock-related farming, as well as how to calculate carbon credits for farms and how a small family farm could utilize that information in their business model. And a third sample project was with a gourmet pudding company that was, again, kind of a small business that the students researched different natural ingredients that go into the pudding to try to help understand how, or if it's possible, to increase the shelf life of this product, as well as create a brochure for this small business. Back to you, Karen.
All right, thank you. Next slide. We're going to start talking a little bit about the program structure. So we have the students meeting multiple times a week. One of those meetings is the class or lab itself, which involves every student on every project. Each project team also has a regular meeting once a week with the industry mentor, the student team, and a Rutgers faculty advisor. And these meetings are set at a specific time during the week. The student team is also expected to meet internally on their own to organize their work and possibly have working meetings. But we don't really set or impose any schedule on that. So this involves a lot of interaction between people, and so we end up with layers of mentoring. The students are mentoring each other. The graduate students in particular provide mentoring and relating their experience to the undergrads, but any student might have a skill that some other student doesn't have. And so there's a lot of sharing and helping each other learn new skills or try new tools. The faculty advisors and mentor the students on their projects as well. And then the industry mentor is going to do some level of mentoring. In particular, they may help the students learn a lot about their company, the project topic, the industry in general. Obviously, they give specific project guidance and feedback. Next slide. We set this semester up with weekly and semester-based objectives. There's a number of assignments given to the students to prepare material and learn tools that will help them with their projects. They give about 4 presentations a semester, and they get feedback along the way on their performance, and then there's a series of team-based assignments. The project itself will have specific deliverables and goals. Some of those set internally by the team, and some of those set by our program expectations. And they work each week, giving weekly updates and getting real-time feedback. To our audience, we would be interested if you have any experience determining appropriate objectives or goals for student projects. This can be a challenge, regardless if it's a student-led project or for an outside organization. Do you have any tips or things that worked well when you work with students if they get off course but are still making a strong academic effort? Next slide. During our weekly course labs, we have different speakers each week covering a variety of topics. The breakout, we have every week either has the students giving a presentation with live feedback or breakout rooms where the students get a chance to practice or work on topics related to the presentations. There are assignments related to the topics that are covered in the lab, and we use an active live chat response throughout the labs to get the students engaged, even during the speakers' discussions. And we usually have like a live, after the breakouts, we usually do a live debriefing, and we'll do a wrap up at the end of the lab where students give a chance to give their thoughts on the topics and what they're getting out of things as they go along. Next slide. Some of the topics we cover include design learning, project management, information search strategy, conflict management, visual design, and creating a project charter. One of the things they learn to do is to think through a timeline and figure out kind of what the milestones in their individual project are and make that specific. Next slide. Networking forms a big part of our program. We get the students networking with each other, with the program advisors, with their industry mentor. We have them all create a LinkedIn account if they haven't previously done so. And sometimes in addition, sometimes the students will meet in person for working sessions, or they'll do site visits, like the co-students who actually went to Maryland to visit this coffee company. We also do a optional set of in-person sessions that offer supplementary material to the main course. And so If you have any great networking tips, we'd be interested in how you get students connected to each other, especially in the online and hybrid formats. Next slide. So I'll hand it back to Christy for outcomes.
Thanks, Karen. So as Karen kind of went over a little bit, our goal is that the project that the students are working on is mutually beneficial to both the student and the partner organization, but obviously student learning is our number one objective. It needs to have academic components that really go along with the student's education. Through these projects, the students are exposed to, both interdisciplinary teams and experiential learning, but also a new industry or industry that they hadn't really considered yet. So we often broaden their view of both what is possible within their field or their degree, but also what are some overlapping areas that they weren't aware of that maybe they really like. So we've heard feedback that this happens where a student works on a project that's kind of a little out of their comfort zone. Maybe they haven't heard of the industry or thought it wasn't really connected to their major, and then they end up pursuing it in some way, whether it's an internship to really dig in and see if it's something of interest, or a first job. As Karen said, another goal is really mentoring and these layers of mentoring that we've discussed, as well as networking, and that these projects complement the student degree coursework. So as far as outcomes, students get to put into practice these skills and concepts into their classes. So our program is a professional science master's, so there is a business and a science component that they're putting into practice with these projects. They're resume builders. The students are getting soft skills, experience working in teams, making presentations, communication skills, running a meeting, and they get jobs either directly or indirectly from these projects that give them a real tangible project, not only that they worked on, but that they completed. So they completed from the start to the finish, and they can talk about the different phases of a project, different hurdles that they work through, and what their actual outcome was, which you don't always see as an intern. So some students end up presenting at conferences or doing site visits, as Karen said, which is great. And we've heard from our students that this is helpful on their resume to help them jumpstart their career, as you see in the first quote, or just to get more professional experience, as you see from our food science student. And then we hear from some students who really put in, the effort and the time, and they really want to get as much out of it as they can. And we've heard from one student that this was one of the most formative experiences that they've ever had. And they never, imagined that they could have such growth in the span of 3 months, which we, obviously is amazing to hear. And it is dependent on the students putting in the effort, but but it's there for them to really take full advantage of these opportunities. And as we hear from our partners, they've been really impressed with both our students as well as kind of what they're getting out of these projects. So we heard from Colgate that, not just that the students did a great job, but they also brought different points of view to really come up with some new ideas and help them to be more creative because of their different perspectives, which is great. And from L'Oreal, we heard that, kind of what the mentor provided, which is great, a experiential learning project on kind of a newer emerging area, beauty care and tech overlap, which you don't hear about very often. But also that our program mirrors what happens in organizations and reflects, the diverse perspectives that exist on in these corporate teams, which is great, and it prepares students to enter the workforce who aren't there yet. So some lessons that we've learned for our specific student population and our program size, virtual definitely works best. Um, it both enables inclusivity of our students who are maybe working full time or have pretty complicated schedules or don't live near campus. They live somewhere else. But it also allows us to expand our offerings of projects. So we have partnered with non-US companies. We've partnered with companies right down the road from Rutgers and companies from a lot of different places in the US that if we were in person, we would not be able to have those kinds of connections. So it expands, the opportunities for these students. As you can see in the photo there, in our early days, we did do some of our presentations in person, but once we started really expanding, we kind of outgrew this model because we have our students meet all of our students to kind of hear lectures and kind of what's coming up, to network with each other. And we kind of found a cap with that around 50 or 75 students where, the room size is an issue or the students don't want to talk if, if they're in a room with that many people. So we've been able to expand online, which offers lots of different ways for the students to communicate. We can do breakout rooms so they meet other students in small groups. They can utilize the chat. So it does work best for our population and the class size that we're at. We've talked about kind of the experiential learning and multidisciplinary teams, but also because of our size and really maybe because of just the types of projects that we're doing, it's really important to have things very structured for the students. So we have structured lectures every week, but also to kind of outline in advance what the project goals are that the students are going to be doing and expectations. As much structure as we can add, we try to do it. So we're adding that every semester we learn. So building on that, some takeaways for other programs. We started very small and built up over time. And I think it allowed us to kind of be able to grow into the size that we're at. So that's one of our lessons learned. And another is that, we have these subject matter experts who are interested in offering their time and knowledge to students, but sometimes maybe they don't have time to teach an entire class and kind of run an entire class for a whole semester on their own, or they're not sure how to do that. So we provide structure for them where they can meet students at specific time slots, and we give them clear guidance on kind of what they're going to be doing and how they're going to be interacting with the students to really utilize their expertise in a way that fits into what time they have to offer. So we've heard great feedback from that, both in terms of our company mentors and in terms of our industry advisors who work for our program part-time. As we talked about, virtual seems the best for our students, but in the early days, we did start out with some projects were all in person and some were in person for our weekly class, but they did conference calls pre-Zoom for their projects. And we kind of learned pros and cons from each of these methods, but settled on totally virtual for this point. So the key is really to know your students' needs, talk to them, figure out what's working and what's not working and adjust. We're adjusting each semester. Another lesson learned is to meet with students on a regular, recurring basis. So with us, it's once a week for the class plus once a week for their project. So that way there's progress that's being made, and also, again, adding structure to that. For the project meetings, set times work better than trying to coordinate one-off meetings every week. Because with student times and with, company meetings and everything else, it gets to be a lot to try to coordinate. And in addition, we've talked about working in teams has worked best for us. And if a student is struggling, maybe they're not sure how to contribute, or, they're feeling a little lost on the project, we found that intervening early helps. We also upfront have them, before they start their project, sign a code of conduct to set clear expectations as well, along with having a very detailed syllabus. But even still, sometimes intervening is easier said than done, and we're still doing continuous improvement on that process also. But our program does have an executive coach who is an asset as well if a student needs that service, along with our other usual departments and student services. So for our industry partners, we really want them to be, not just to want to mentor students, but be excited and really want to have that engagement, and to understand that this is not a consulting company. So we don't charge companies to participate, but what that means is that the student deliverables are identified as a goal that they're working towards, but it's not a promise. The process of working through the project is the real deliverable to the company. And we call this a knowledge exchange. So, the students are bringing their time and working on these projects, and the company's learning from that. And that whole process is really what the deliverable from our end is to the company. But when we frame it that way, the companies have been very excited as a whole in terms of what they have gotten out of the program. So because these are learning projects, they should always be vetted by subject matter experts, either knowledgeable faculty or other experts, that student learning is going to take place, as this is our, number one goal. We do have these conversations with organizations. Sometimes the project's nearly there, but there's some adjustments that can make it a viable project. And other times the projects are really something that's mission critical. They have to get done. They're on a tight timeline, or there's not enough really learning content for the students, or we think it's something that, really is a paid position versus something that's kind of an exploratory learning project. So we'll have these conversations with companies, and most of the time we can come up with something that is really exciting for the students, but other times we suggest, maybe this is better for an intern or full-time hire or some other way to engage with the university, because we want these to really be focused on learning. And because we're so upfront with these requirements and make sure everything's well-defined before anything ever gets approved or kicks off, partners are generally happy with the outcomes, and a lot of them return for multiple semesters, either to, do totally different projects, or to kind of continue, like, okay, we did this piece of a product design, like the coffee roaster I talked about earlier. How can we add to that, or what other components can we do? Can we do an app to go with it? Can we do some kind of marketing campaign. So sometimes they'll build off of a topic in different ways. So our concluding thoughts is that students benefit both professionally and academically from these external experiential learning projects. Students utilize this during interviews while they're at internships or jobs, along with in their more advanced coursework. I've heard from one alumni as an example that the way that we taught our students to run meetings through project management tips and how to do an update every week and things like that, she actually taught her team in her first job and was in charge of actually running some of her team meetings because of this skill that she gained. They were so impressed with that they asked her to transfer that knowledge to her team. So those kinds of soft skills are helpful and utilized in kind of different ways. But they also give students the skills and confidence to work in a virtual team-based environment, which they may be doing at some point in their career. For the organizations, getting this outside viewpoint on a project or on a topic is helpful. And it also opens up topics that they may not otherwise have time to work on. So some smaller organizations have used this to grow their business, to expand a product line, or maybe to pivot their business into a direction that they either had planned or a new direction, depending on what the students find, which we've heard. So through this program, the students get to hear about innovations across industries that they may not otherwise be aware of, both from their own projects, but also through their peers' presentations throughout the semester. So they hear about all these things going on in fields that they're not doing a project in through our class as well, which is exciting. Organizations have come back to us and said that these projects have helped them come up with new ideas of things to work on, either building off of the projects that they've done or just kind of hearing about some kind of analysis or new development from one of the other projects that gives them a spark of an idea. Some industry mentors have even told us that them managing these student teams and coming up with a successful project through our process has actually helped them themselves to get promoted. So it's a really great opportunity for our industry partners as well in different ways. So with that, we can open it up to questions. And if you're interested in discussing any of this with us further or partnering with us, you can also reach out. So we'll put our emails there. And then I'm going to stop sharing so I can see some of the chat. So let me just see if I can stop sharing maybe.
Click the share button at the bottom.
Stop sharing. Okay, perfect.
Not much in the chat so far.
Okay. Do we have any questions, comments, or thoughts from anyone in the audience? Or if not, does our moderator have any questions?
I always have questions. And I have to say, I feel like this program is a hidden gem. I don't know if anybody is aware of what you're doing. And it's quite unique and valuable. But I mean, if I were to ask a more, I don't know, technical question about what you've created, I'm curious about how you weave synchronous and asynchronous interactions in this program throughout the program. I'm assuming there are times that groups are meeting together and, in that moment, or you're maybe with you also mentoring, facilitating, and then times that they are, because as you were saying, they're mostly busy and might not have that flexibility for much synchronous interaction.
Karen, do you have any thoughts, or do you want me to
Yeah,
jump in?
I mean, I can say something and you can add on to it. I mean, we've mostly focused on the synchronous interaction. So having the class lab where the students all come together as a big group, having the weekly project meetings. There are, of course, assignments due, and they, some of that's work they do on their own time, of course, and submit it. And the student teams have a lot of flexibility in setting up sort of how they work together. And usually that works pretty good. Sometimes we have to talk the teams through how do you figure out, how to, when you've got 5 busy people whose schedules don't really mesh other than the 1 hour meeting with the mentor. How do you balance that? And that can be a challenge.
No, I agree. Um, and I think one of the ways that we've kind of bridged the gap between in person and virtual, because we started out in person, is the synchronous meetings. But as Karen said, having the student teams kind of coordinate what works for them in terms of assigning the work that they have to do each week, preparing for the class, and that kind of thing, they can do on their own, as well. And there is a learning curve to that.
There's learning curve.
Yeah, yeah.
I can't tell you how many teams have there's been at least one person who's never used WhatsApp or never used Discord, which are two of the most common ways the students stay in touch
Yeah.
with each other. And so there's a lot of pieces like that that for some of the students the world opens up, and that's very interesting. I see we have a question in the chat.
And then a few
Um,
more in the Q&A also. So we could start in the chat and then go over if you
so
want.
this one is saying Dina Novak says I love hearing about the unexpected benefits to the partners and the soft skill development for students. I assume that much of that happens organically, but are there specific things you do to facilitate those kinds of unexpected positive outcomes? One of the things we do explicitly is their final presentation. They do 2 final presentations, one to their company and mentor that is, longer and more explicit to the project. But they do a short form to the class and to anybody that, we basically invite the world, but in particular invite the professional science and master's program students. And that is a 3 to 4 minute presentation. For a large team might be 5 minutes. And so we're teaching them to take a semester long project and turn it into a 3 minute talk given by multiple people. And that's one of the big skills that they take away is just that organization. And Christy said we also teach them, we give them templates on how do you write an agenda, how do you do a weekly update slide. We found that if we give them very clear guidance, it helps make sure that every student participates in those updates. And so there are some things we do. I don't know if there's anything else you can think of, Christy.
Yeah, with some of our class labs that all the students go to, every week we have them go into breakout rooms, sometimes with their project team and sometimes just with random students that are in the class that they can meet. So they're learning how to introduce themselves, how to be in these new groups of people that they don't know where they have to talk. And we give them sometimes topics that are related to their upcoming assignments, and sometimes things like, let's practice introducing yourself, come up with a few icebreakers, and, how do you talk to a new group of professionals that you don't know. So that's early on in the class, but I think, for them, learning how to introduce yourself in a professional way is useful. And then pieces like, the project management, um, giving them feedback on their presentations over several classes in terms of both their presentation skills and, you know, how rehearsed it is, as well as the design of their slides and how clearly they're communicating what they're doing, which is very difficult to do in an entire semester's worth of work, condensing it down, as Karen said, to 3 minutes. So that's a handful of ways, but we do work on that throughout the semester. And we have our executive coach give a talk to them about both conflict management and kind of team building, and gives them some exercises to work through, again, in these breakout rooms with small groups of students, to kind of talk through, how would you work on this type of situation that came up? What would you do? And that kind of thing. So another question from the chat, how do you deal with students who study international relations or security studies? Karen, do you want to take that one, or do you want me to start?
Sure. Well, the first thing I'll say, and it pertains to one of the questions that was in the Q&A, we get students from a really wide variety of majors. We've had psychology students, we've had public health students, we get a lot of people from engineering and all the sciences. I don't know if we've had anybody specifically from international relations. The MBS program has a cybersecurity concentration, so we do get in a bunch of projects that cover cybersecurity related topics. So we routinely run a sort of boot camp project that's associated with potentially attending the Maritime Risk Symposium, and that can be anything from sort of a soft from my idea of hard sciences discussion of like what are the risks related to some aspect of the maritime industry, to something that's much more analytical, trying to pull actual data from the system. I think we're currently running a project that's sort of looking at how do you teach people who are just joining a new company about security issues. So we just end up with projects that, we kind of have an idea what the range of majors the students have, but al- almost anybody can contribute to something that's focused on like a marketing campaign or a broad business analysis. And in some of those cases, our advisors and mentors will teach students to do things like SWOT analysis, or how do you interview somebody for a psychology type, user experience project. Um, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Christy.
Yeah. I mean, we do have a lot of security related projects, and because our projects are multidisciplinary, we often do kind of anti-human trafficking projects that may have both either a public health component or just a kind of, how do you think about this topic working with a nonprofit that does public policy kind of advocacy with something like data analysis. So some of the students come in not having done data analysis, so they kind of build up their Excel skills, or learn to use Tableau, and others are more advanced in that. So they're having to learn, how do I do a literature review on a topic that I'm not really familiar with? So students kind of contribute in different ways to those kinds of projects. But we also have kind of an airport security related project, and we have done over the years different projects relating to with the state police and others, but a lot of them are multidisciplinary. So they may have a few themes. Security may be one of the themes, and, cybersecurity, data analysis, or some other topic may be the other that's coming together. And so students who don't have that kind of technical background in analysis or cyber are bringing skills from other topics that are relevant. So it's really project specific, but we try to form partnerships with different programs, so we have a sense of what students are going to come in, so we can try to frame projects that are relevant to them. But if anyone on is interested in partnering in that way, I mean, we're definitely open to chatting, because all of this just helps to enhance our programs and bring different viewpoints to our projects. And so I think Karen kind of covered which majors this is applicable to, but a lot of them are related to the professional science masters. So if you go to mbs.rutgers.edu, you can see our concentrations. And all of those overlap with business, finance, marketing as well, because that's another component of our program. But we expand to include like public health and general engineering, general security, things like that, that we often see as part of our projects coming in.
Yeah, when we started working with undergraduates, we started partnering with the Honors College. So it was never really, because the Honors College at Rutgers covers so many different majors, it was always kind of open to a broad set of majors. And we found that almost all students can find something to contribute to a pretty wide range of projects. One of the things we didn't spend a lot of time talking about is we have the students fill out an extensive application to understand their interests and their backgrounds. And we have 2 or 3 people who go through those applications in excruciating detail to match the students. So a good bit of the labor in running the course, not all of it, but maybe a third of it, is actually matching the students into teams so that we get teams that really have complementary and compatible skills and that really fit the projects that they're assigned to.
Yeah, and if we get a student that maybe we're not sure how they would fit in, or they're unclear in their application as far as what they're looking for, we do an interview process as well for those students to really understand what they're looking for, make sure it's a good fit, make sure they understand what they're signing up for, but to understand, what types of projects they may be interested in. And then often for those students, we'll go through and kind of talk about the projects that we have, because, that's one of the pieces, is we have to set these projects up before we, before we have the full class, the class roster. So, so that's part of it as well, is talking through what are you interested in, and okay, this project, here are the skills that you're going to gain from this, and here's how it might relate to your major, or to your professional interests. And then the students kind of work through, for those cases where it may not be obvious which kinds of projects they're interested in. We help them work through something that would be of interest. Another question, do we have any partners in the biological sciences? We are starting that in the fall, I think, with undergrads. We've
always had a few,
yeah.
a random one here and there that was specifically life sciences biology. We usually do get a fair number in personal care and drug discovery, which are big concentrations for the MBS program. But we are starting to work with the Rutgers Life Sciences department, and so we're going to be building up in the biological sciences area.
But to clarify, we do not do any in-person lab work. So that's one boundary around our projects, that can be limited for some of the life sciences. So we kind of think through what projects are relevant to those students. Because some of those students end up in our master's program as well, in some of our life science concentrations. So yeah, if you're interested, I can put our emails in the chat.
This semester,
we're happy to have you either officially partner, or if you're in kind of the life sciences, to share either students with us that you think might be interested, or we can always share our promotional flyers if you're willing to share with your own classes or advisees or whatever. So I'll put my email in the chat. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll note that we have we've been working with one of the professors in the agricultural group at Rutgers on a couple of projects, one of which is a climate data dashboard sort of thing. So we definitely get, and we have MBS has a food science program, so we have people from the food science department that work with us on various things. So
Yeah, and we've worked with some hospitals, and I mean, very different, very
lots of
different.
different things.
Yeah, very different types of topics. So, um, so we're happy to share. And also, if there's certain types of projects or industries that you think might be of most interest to your students, we can see if that might be feasible for us to try to offer as well. No promises, because these do take quite a bit of work to set up and figure out. But we have had some success with students from biology in the past. It's just kind of thinking about what projects make sense that are not lab based. Yeah. Any other questions?
Okay, thank you, everyone. The next session is starting at 3 o'clock, so we're just on time. That was great. I think a lot of people are, I don't know, spinning wheels about potential ahead. So thank you so much for sharing what you do.